We are just a few days away from the first game of the NFL season, and you probably just finished up a draft recently, and even if you're feeling good about your team, that doesn't mean that there still isn't an opportunity to improve. So Headliner Nation, welcome into the first waiver wire video of 2023. Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? And once again, this season, I'll be covering the waiver wire video for you guys that will be dropping somewhere between late morning and early afternoon on Mondays. All right, quick explanation on how waiver wire videos work for us. My goal is to target people that are less than 50% owned and no higher than 60% owned across the different platforms in the fantasy industry. So if numbers look off to you because you're like, this guy is owned in way more fantasy leagues, then you got to take that up with ESPN, Yahoo, Sleeper, CBS, and other platforms out there because that's where we get our data from. And we also want to make sure that we include players for people who are in shallow leagues or deeper leagues so everybody can get something from this video. And this video will be a little bit different because it's week one. I'm really just locking into the few guys that have seen their names pop up a lot over the last couple of weeks as the preseason comes to an end. Maybe there's been an injury. Maybe their position on the team has changed. Maybe they're going to be a contributor now and they weren't a couple of weeks ago. We'll toss those guys in for right now. But in later weeks, I'm going to be taking a look at running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends that we either need to own for the week coming up or we need to get added to our team because in the next couple of weeks, we could really see them become a fantasy viable player. We'll try to be out in front on as many guys as possible. Then for quarterbacks and defensive special teams, we're going to be looking at players and teams that we can stream each week in case you're dealing with buys or maybe you're just not getting the type of performance from that position that you would like. And then after a few weeks to wrap it up, I'll be talking about players that you could drop from your roster. Guys that are highly owned in the industry, but really aren't offering you any type of fantasy upside. So we're just going to kick them to the curb and try to add somebody else in their place. Now, we're not dropping anybody right now, so this week won't have that. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and start with running backs. Raheem Mostert is a guy that I've actually had listed as a sleeper for quite a few weeks now. Everybody's all over Devon Achane, and he's being drafted way higher than Raheem Mostert was. Mostert's probably still available in quite a bit of leagues. Now, if you just recently drafted, he was probably already picked up. But if you drafted over the last couple of months, he could potentially still be out there. And Jeff Wilson Jr. heading to the IR to start the season, with Achane still being younger and learning the offense, is going to give Mostert an opportunity to have some big games to kick off the 2023 season. It's hard to tell what we're doing in Indianapolis, but right now it's either going to be Deion Jackson or the lesser owned Evan Hall. And we're still waiting on Zach Moss because he does have a broken arm and is going to miss week one, but could potentially be back for week two. But if Deion Jackson and Evan Hall look good together in week one, these two are going to take a stranglehold on the backfield to begin the season and may not give it up. Now, if you're looking for impact right away, it's Deion Jackson because more than likely he will have a better week the first couple of weeks of the season. But Evan Hall is a guy that I really like because of his pass catching ability. He's also really hard to bring down. Could he get a little bit better in pass protection? Absolutely. But if this is a guy that shows some big play potential and catching potential, he could find himself on the field more and more often. We've spent all offseason trying to figure out whether DeAndre Swift or Rashad Penny was going to be the starting running back. Well, it sounds like it's going to be DeAndre Swift, but out of nowhere over the last few weeks, Kenneth Gainwell is the guy. There are a lot of beat writers right now that are saying Gainwell is locked into the RB2 position. It's crazy, but they brought in these other running backs over the offseason, and then it's just going to end up being the guy that was there all along anyway. Kenneth Gainwell really is a guy that we should have stashed on our bench right now. We know that DeAndre Swift has issues with missing games. We know that Rashad Penny can't stay healthy. Kenneth Gainwell could be the #1 running back within a few weeks of the beginning of the season. And what about Jaylen Warren? The reports out of training camp is that he looks fantastic. And I know there's a lot of people out there that don't agree with it, but we could be looking at the next version of the Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard backfield. Not the one last year where Tony Pollard broke out and started to become the reliable performer each week, but the one where we saw Tony Pollard get a ton of touches out of the backfield in the passing game game, and Zeke still get a lot of work on the ground. Najee Harris is the number one. Let's not make anything confusing with that. But Jaylen Warren is right on his heels. And if he has some huge games and Najee Harris can't get better in terms of his efficiency, Jaylen Warren could start to see more and more touches. All right, moving on to wide receivers, and Nico Collins saw a 30% target share when CJ Stroud was on the field this preseason. Everybody, all offseason long, has been singing praises of Tank Dell just because CJ Stroud was like, yeah, I like this guy, let's draft him. That's great. But all along on this channel, we've been saying Nico Collins may have the best shot to be the wide receiver one on this team. And it continues to show, and CJ Stroud continues to look his way. Not only did Jonathan Mingo run 29 routes on 31 of Bryce Young's dropbacks this preseason, but he had a 20% target share as well. Now it's looking more and more like the fact that Adam Thielen is going to be Bryce Young's go-to guy this season, but Jonathan Mingo is very, very close to being the number 2 on this team. Hayden Hurst, yeah, he might be looked at, but he's not as dynamic as Jonathan Mingo. Terrace Marshall Jr. has had tons of time to break out and really hasn't looked the part as of yet. When you take a look at what Jonathan Mingo can do and has the draft capital now as well, I really believe that he is a guy that's going to see some big plays early on, and people are finally going to pay attention. Marvin Mims was the only wide receiver last year in college football to have 40 or more receptions and log 20 or more yards per reception. He was one of the best deep threats in all of college football for Oklahoma. Now he's on a team that is decimated by injuries, doesn't have a ton of wide receivers around him to take targets, and he's got the draft capital to go with it. When Marvin Mims was drafted, I told everybody, I love the landing spot, I just don't think I'll love it till 2024. Christmas has come early, ladies and gentlemen. Marvin Mims could be a huge breakout this season. For all the hype that Christian Watson gets, people are not paying enough attention to Romeo Doubs. Jordan Love had a passer rating of 158.3 on Romeo Doubs' 4 targets this season, and he also averaged over 18 yards per catch on his receptions. He's likely going to be in the slot quite a bit, and he's likely going to be a guy that, yes, he could see a decent amount of targets, but if he's going over 18 yards per reception, it means that he could also be adding a little big playability as well. Christian Watson may have a higher ceiling, but I think Romeo Doubs could end up having a much safer floor. Van Jefferson has snuck his way into starting lineups in week 1 already, which is crazy to think because nobody's really been talking about him all offseason long, but Cooper Kupp is banged up once again, is going to see a specialist, and don't forget that in 2021, Van Jefferson put together a fantastic season where he caught 50 of his 89 targets for just over 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. He's probably going to be the wide receiver one on this offense and the deep threat. We know Matthew Stafford has liked looking his way, but now he might be forced to look his way all the time. If you decided to go late round tight end in your draft, maybe you don't love the options on your team right now. So a few other players that you could potentially take a shot at, Luke Musgrave from Green Bay. In the preseason, he led the team in target share and targets per route run. He looks to be a pretty decent part of this offense. Now, does that just automatically translate into the season? Who knows? Rookie tight ends are really, really tough to own because there's only been 3 over the last 10 years that have been top 12 fantasy options. But Luke Musgrave is starting to look more and more like one of those options day by day. Hunter Henry has been Mac Jones's guy in the red zone this offseason. If you take a look at the notes from training camp, whether it be 11 on 11, 7 on 7, in the drills when they're closer in the red zone or by the goal line, Hunter Henry is being looked at by Mac Jones on a consistent basis. So maybe the guy doesn't have a ton of receptions and doesn't have a ton of receiving yards, but 8 to 10 touchdowns this season is very realistic. And if Tyler Higbee is still available in your league, he is a really good option to look at while Cooper Kupp is banged up. This is a guy that once Cooper Kupp comes back, maybe we go ahead and let go back to waivers, but for now we take advantage of the injury and we roll with Tyler Higbee. All right. You shouldn't need to stream a quarterback in week 1, but who knows? Maybe you're in a 2 quarterback or super flex league and you just need another option this week. Well, both of these guys come from the same game, Kenny Pickett and Brock Purdy. I mean, Trey Lance being gone signals to everybody that Brock Purdy is the quarterback of the future. San Francisco's gonna run with this guy for as long as possible. I don't see Sam Darnold taking his starting spot unless he's really, really bad. Keep in mind that at the end of last season in Brock Purdy's 5 starts, he was a top 10 quarterback 3 times. Kenny Pickett looked absolutely dominating this preseason and had some great stats to show for it. He completed 13 of 15 passing attempts for 199 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a perfect quarterback rating. Now listen, if this can carry over into the regular season, then you know what? Pittsburgh will look really smart for drafting Kenny Pickett last year. But if he looks closer to the 2022 version than these numbers, then it's going to be a really, really tough year for Pittsburgh. All right, what if you need to stream a defensive special team option this week? Well, I've got a couple that are super high risk, but could be high reward in week 1 as well. And that's Green Bay and Jacksonville, because both of these guys are going to be facing younger quarterbacks that have some concerns about their throwing. Green Bay gets Justin Fields in week 1. Yeah, he might run all over the place, but if they can get some turnovers in the passing game, that's just going to add fantasy points for you. And then Jacksonville going up against Indianapolis. I love Anthony Richardson, and I'm probably the #1 Anthony Richardson truther out there, but even I realize he's going to have struggles this year. And coming against Jacksonville in week 1 could absolutely happen. But here's the thing. Both Fields and Richardson are uber dynamic. So starting either of these defenses could bite you in the butt. But if you get some turnovers, they absolutely could be week winners as well. What about Seattle going up against the LA Rams? No Cooper Kupp. All they really have to stop at that point is Van Jefferson and Tyler Higbee. Crash the run. Don't let Cam Akers do a whole lot. And Seattle's walking out with a big win this week. So if they're still available, they're probably the safest of the 3 options. And headliners, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I'm going to do some players to drop in a few weeks. Right now, though, be confident in your team. If you really think you have a player that you might want to drop for one of these options, then leave me a comment down below and I'll answer it for you and let you know who would I drop and who would I pick up. But hey, the waiver wire video is short and sweet this week, and that is okay. Trust your teams, trust what you did in the draft, and add a few pieces here and there that feel like would make you stronger. But for now, Headliner Nation, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you are new here. And do not forget, if you have questions about a guy that you may want to drop right now, leave your comment down below and I will get to those. But for now, Headliner Nation, peace out, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.